and I maintain, that nobody, not everybody is fit for marriage, and not everybody has to marry. There are, other destinies available.
You're watching Not Just Auntie with Suman Adepalli.
I welcome Suma Varghese, our guest today. She is better known as Editor-in-Chief of Life Positive, a magazine which she worked with for 21 long years. Prior to that, she was editor of Society magazine and senior editor with Gentleman magazine. Currently, Suma is founder and facilitator of the popular Zen of Good Writing course, a program that blends spirituality with the art of writing. Suma has had a long and illustrious career as a writer, journalist and editor over 40 years. She is also the author of Traveling Light and Traveling Lighter. Her third book, 50 Life Lessons, has just gone into print with Hay House. Suma is also a popular guest speaker at many conferences and seminars and has been intimately connected with the rise of the spiritual movement in India. Suma and I have been friends for the longest time, and I am so grateful to have her as a guest on my show.
You're watching Not Just Auntie.
Hi Suma, welcome to the show.
Hi Suman, glad to be here.
I'm so happy to have you on board as one of our early guests. So when I was just thinking of the women I wanted to, interview for Not Just Auntie, you were one of the first few people who came to mind.
Wow.
The impact that you have on society, the impact you've had and continue to have with your writing. I remember reading Life Positive as a 20-year-old, and I was your columns. The honesty and the spirit with which you used to write, I was like, wow, I want to meet this lady. I'm going to meet this lady someday. And here we are.
Amazing, yeah. I'm so delighted. Thank you so much, Suman. Means all the world to me. Thank you.
Everyone knows you as the editor of Life Positive. I mean, I think anyone who thinks of Life Positive has to think of your name, your face. You were editor with them till you retired for 21 long years. I mean, I think that's like the longest time. I mean, you don't hear of this kind of, what do you say? What's the word? The tenure with a company? Is that the word?
Absolutely, that's the word.
Of 10 years or even a decade now, but you spent 2 decades with Life Positive. So let's start from the beginning. How did you think of being a writer? That is the first question. So you answer that and then I will ask you the second part.
There is an interesting story to that, which is that I've always been a reader, since I was about 8 years old. And I also was a pretty good writer, I think, because the teachers would share my essays and whatnot. But nothing really clicked, and all of us were living in this, my family was living in this really tiny place called Sunabeda. It's a township for HAL. So we had very little understanding of, awareness of what kind of careers to get into or anything like that. And then along comes this friend of mine, and she, began to download about her mother. And she was upset with her mother or something or the other. And then naturally she felt a little guilty about it. So she said, oh, it's not that I don't love her. So I kind of said very soothingly, I said, of course you love her. It's just that you're not blind to her faults. So that felt like a very nice thing for her to hear.
Profound. How old were you when you said that?
I think I was about 14 or so, 14 or 15 or something. And spontaneously she said, maybe I think you should be a writer because you've got such a way with words. And, kind of a bulb went off in my head. I said, wow, that sounds like a great, thing to do, because I was such an avid reader. And then to kind of cement the decision, my sister, my third sister, Leela, got married to a journalist around, when I was 16. So actually to meet one of those chappies up front, I think that really made all the difference. And I felt, okay, this is something I can do. And thank God, because there wasn't much I could do, but this was obviously something I could.
Did you this was the second part of the question. Did your parents want you to do something more traditional, or they were okay with it?
Actually, my mother, both my parents have been, wonderfully liberal with us. But my poor father had me chalked out for medicine. I have really no idea why, because I showed zero inclination for it. But nevertheless, he insisted I go with him to Chennai, where this Vellore medical, the test was there for the Vellore, I think it's called CMC, college. I think I scored a big zero. I was least interested, and I must have humiliated me a bit, but nevertheless, I was actually glad. And then when my father, poor fellow, realized this, my mother let him have it. She said, look, she doesn't want to do this. Let her do what she wants to do. And after that, they simply didn't say a word. They just let me have it my way. And for me, I think having it my way was very clear. It was very important.
The other question which I want to ask you is, the pressure to get married, especially in a country like India, where pressure to get married is as thick as the air women breathe. So, because there are strict timelines as to when a girl should have a career, when she should get married, when she should have kids. So was this a pressure for you, as in, since you're proudly single and you're not
happily single as well.
Happily single.
Yeah.
So was this a thing for you?
Well, at my time, I was born in 1957, and I would have been an adult sometime in the 70s. It was, more or less mandatory for women to get married. This whole concept of career women was just about forming, But I did not get married, not because I was this great career woman, but because I honestly felt I'm not ready for marriage. I was very confused within myself, as to what life was all about. And I felt, if I'm so confused about myself, how on earth can I look after somebody else? And I really wish a lot of other people would ask themselves these questions before they actually got married, because I'm firmly convinced that not everybody needs to get married. Whereas in India, it's kind of taken for granted that, even if you're an alcoholic, even if you are some kind of a mental basket case, it's still taken for granted that you jolly well get married. So having said that, it wasn't necessarily easy, because naturally my parents, they felt it was their duty to get me married. But what really helped was that my sister Susan, I'm the youngest of 6 sisters, by the way. Okay. So my sister Susan, who's number 4, she actually paved the way for me, because she decided very bravely that she was not going to get married. So she got all the flack from the entire family. And I think by the time they got around to me, they were a little more, they were unhappy that I decided to get married, but they didn't pressurize me. And the beautiful thing about both my parents, God bless them, is that they never, dragged me by my ear and said, whether you like it or not, you're getting married. They totally respected both Susan's and my choice to remain single. And for that, God bless them.
This is such an important message, Suma, because even, I'll tell you, I'll share my case. My parents typically expected that between 25, latest 28. Look, so I have 2 sisters, and we just assumed that, and if you had a boyfriend, well and good, but otherwise they would start searching for us. And it was just like, you finish school, you finish college, and you get married, and you find the one, or the one is found for you. And this is the expected age where it is biologically correct to have kids. So I think what you said is a very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I maintain, that not everybody is fit for marriage, and not everybody has to marry. There are, other destinies available. And I think it's high time Indian parents recognize that.
And you're happy. You're happy like this.
I am very happy. It may have taken me some time to come to terms with this. And not that I ever really wanted to marry, but then after I had that awakening that we'll probably talk about later, then I began to have a few relationships, which I was always too afraid to venture into. But those relationships never really worked out, And I kind of feel that they were actually part of my growth graph, because through relationships, you learn a lot, And then they kind of organically melted away. And I was then left feeling pretty whole within myself, And up till today, now I don't know what the future holds for me, but up till today, I have not missed, being married. And I'm, in fact, my main point of view, something I trumpet quite loudly, is that it's better to be, to have nothing than the wrong, better to have no one than the wrong someone, So.
Oh, well said. And so, I mean, it's bang on. Okay, so then coming to the next question, there was this phase in your life which started with you being agnostic as a teenager, I believe, then going into severe depression and ending in a massive spiritual awakening. I know this because I've attended your Zen of Good Writing workshop. So you had shared this with us at that time, and, also as friends. Like, if you don't mind, could you share, part or the entire story with us?
Sure. It's a very long story, so I'll try and truncate it, actually. But the bottom line is that, I was this extremely confused human being. Yeah, agnostic I was at the age of 14. I dropped God like a hot brick. But that was, and for a long time I kept wondering, is lightning going to strike me? Because I'm born in the Christian faith, and you simply don't do things like that, But my logic was, because I'd just gone into science, I felt like I just can't reconcile, the Christian understanding of God making the world in 7 days with this Darwinian theory. So I said, no, this doesn't make sense to me, both of them can't be right. So I'm going to let go of God. And I was not very, having let go of God, I realized I really needed that presence in my life, but it was too late, I couldn't get back. But, and I think that was part of the reason for the big depression also. The other reasons were that I had been living in this extremely sheltered place in Sunabeda. And suddenly I was thrust into Sophia College hostel, such a very elitist sort of a place. And there was this little country hick from, Sunabeda. And I had a whole lot of insecurities going on. So it eventually all kind of culminated in a depression. And that depression lasted for quite a while. It lasted me for a good 16 years. I kind of drifted through those years. Yeah, I drifted through those years. Nothing made too much sense to me, and I was motivated by nothing at all. But it wasn't, it wasn't, I was functioning, but I was functioning at a very low level. I was not even interested in my career, and I just drifted. Thankfully, I was a good writer and therefore managed to hold down some jobs. But this whole concept of, loving life or being engaged with life, that just didn't happen to me until I was 16.
Clinical depression.
I was 30. You could say that. I was too scared to ever actually go to a psychotherapist or psychiatrist or anything like that. But yes, all the symptoms were there, complete disinterest in life, sort of totally, to the extent of sometimes you're not even aware. I couldn't feel a thing, for one thing. I simply couldn't feel a thing. A friend once, I remember, called me, and she was going through such a bad time because she had some sort of, her pineal gland, I think, was malfunctioning, and she actually turned blind. And she was crying. But I couldn't feel anything. That actually is what happens when you're in depression. No matter what people tell you, sad things, black things, and horrific things, you can't feel anything within, So that was the situation with me. But thank God, Suman. When I was about 33, the whole thing, what shall I say? The whole thing eclipsed into an amazing spiritual awakening. And if you ask me, I think those 16 years was needed. Because, I had such a thorough grounding in misery that for me, such a thorough grounding. I almost felt as if I've, done a PhD in misery. So that helped me understand people very well, especially people who are going through, depression or misery. I understood that state of mind very well. But apart from that, I think it gave me a deep yearning for happiness. I mean, that last 1 year before I actually got the awakening, I was in quest of happiness. I mean, what was this thing that I didn't have? And, that I was so desperate for. I think that's what enabled me to get that awakening. In brief, I'll tell you what the awakening was. It really hinged on happiness. It happened because I finally, and for the very first time in my life, had a relationship with someone. But I was inept at it. I was really bad because I was, burdened with such a dreadfully low self-esteem and all that kind of stuff. So I was really bad at it. And finally, this guy said that he's going to call the relationship off. And he said a couple of things that really impacted me hugely. One thing he said is that relationships are meant to be happy and ours has not been. And for me, it was like one track going, oh my God, here's this word happiness again, And the other thing he said was, that relationships are meant to be beautiful. And that's not what ours was either. So this word beautiful for me is a kind of a trigger word. I love beauty in all forms. I'm very drawn to it. So this idea that relationships could be beautiful was a totally novel thought for me. And I said, wow, what could it be to have a beautiful relationship? And in short, I decided, that I was going to make this person happy outside the marriage, the relationship, because we were still, working together. So, and so I tried. I mean, and for me, it was that decision was like, absolutely like something written on stone. I felt that there was no way I was not going to do this. And I was not someone who had these kind of adamantine intentions. I was a will-o'-the-wisp. But this one intention was like, absolutely adamantine. And for the next 3-4 days, I tried to make this person happy. But this person was not, he on the contrary was trying to kill whatever feelings he had for me, and he was being exceedingly nasty. So there I'd be, all embroiled in anger and jealousy and so many other negative emotions. And I kept asking myself, now, if I'm just going to be caught up in these emotions, how can I ever make this guy happy? And after 3-4 days of, wrestling with this question, one day it just hit me, it was an incredible revelation that if I really wanted this man's happiness, if his happiness was really important to me, then I should be okay with whatever he said or did or everything. It should not matter to me how it impacted me, because it was his happiness that mattered more than mine. I don't know whether this comes across to you, Suman, the way it was actually.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Because many people feel, are you saying that you should be a doormat? But not at all. It was a revelation, that I could actually prioritize somebody else's happiness over and above mine. And the minute I realized this, all my negative charge just settled down. And for the very first time in my life, I was clothed in profound peace. And then I actually started making kind of a mantra out of it, is the other person's happiness that matters and not mine. And every time I would do that, I'd flip my ego. Literally, it was a physical thing. I could feel myself leaving this, this head that we are imprisoned in and land up somewhere between me and the other. Like, if you and I, if you're there and I'm here, then I'd land up somewhere here. So that I was able to arbitrate with total objectivity my interests or my likes and dislikes or my needs were no more important to me than yours. It was an amazing experience on the whole. And I think it really, that for a month, within a month, I actually pieced together the whole jigsaw puzzle of life. I realized that because the more I was doing this, the more I was prioritizing the other's happiness, the happier I was getting. I was getting so happy. And then I realized that this is the design of life. We are not meant to get our happiness by pursuing individual happiness. Because the minute you say, no, I want to be happy, then everybody and everything is a hurdle in the way. Like, I want to be happy, but you being nasty to me. So you're a hurdle to my happiness. And it goes on with everything. I want to be happy, but life is sending me illnesses, so I can't be happy. So the minute you prioritize individual happiness as a goal, you are going to be in conflict with the whole world. Whereas if you say, I'm going to be happy through making somebody else happy, then actually the whole conflict disappears, because making someone finding my happiness through making somebody happy means that no matter what you're going through, I can still derive my happiness from that. I mean, if you wanted, let's say, for me to give you my very precious laptop, I would do it because your happiness was more important than mine. And that actually made me very, very happy. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So this I mean, because it worked for you is okay, but in the case of the person you were talking about, I also feel like at some level he is responsible for his own happiness, rather than telling you, Suma, the relationship is supposed to feel happy. But a lot of times it is some work that even he need to do. Of course, you were doing work.
Totally agree with you, Suman. But you see, as far as I was concerned, I was not going into that space at all, because that was his problem and not mine. My problem was only that I had decided I was going to make this guy happy, and I wanted to achieve this. For the first time in my life, I wanted something unconditionally. So that's enabled me to stop focusing on what he should have been doing and what he should be doing. And I began to prioritize only what I can do to make this fellow happy. Therefore, I got into that space. I was able to literally let go of my ego for the very first time. And you
don't have control of the opposite person. So you actually detached yourself from that. You let
Absolutely. Because the more we keep saying this person should change, we are giving them power. Whereas if I say, regardless of what this person says, because I want to be happy and I find I can only be happy through making the other person happy, I'm going to make this person happy, regardless of where he's coming from. And he was a nasty soul. I mean, I hate to say it, but he was not what you might call an angel, with a halo around his head or anything. He was quite a nasty human being. But for whatever reason, God sent him into my life to give me this awakening, or actually it was nothing less than an enlightenment experience, So I'm eternally grateful.
I think every girl has one such nasty soul. And before you reach where you have to.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. Wow. Wow. I mean, I totally got my answers. Was this experience the reason why your writing was so honest and so positive and so personal, I would say?
Totally, Suman. I think this experience changed me almost 360 degrees. I mean, I was this extremely reactive, unhappy, confused, negative, Also, I mean, I was everything that is the very opposite of, at least partly very opposite of who I am. I've still got a long way to go. But definitely I've moved through. This was in 1991, so it's more than about how many years? 30 plus years. Yeah.
30 years, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, that I learned along the way was that if you, actually what had happened to me, Suman, is that at some point I thought I found that I was ready to work on myself, And when I found that, the whole content of my consciousness just opened up, zoop, like that. And for the very first time, I was able to look at myself as I truly was. And that was horrifying, because those 16 years of depression had done a whole lot of damage to me. And there I was having to confront the fact that my self-esteem is zero, my focus is zero, my concentration is zero, self-respect is zero, everything big zeros everywhere I looked. And it was very, very, very daunting to look at yourself like that, when all you can see are, qualities that don't measure up. But somewhere within me, and I've always been guided by the inner voice.
I think it's so brave also to see yourself stripped down like this.
I guess I was ready for it, Suman. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened, because if I had done this prematurely, I would have gone mad. You need a certain amount of stability and centeredness to be able to see yourself like that, So anyway, because of that, I realized that, my inner voice told me that this is not something you are to hide. You are to share this,
Who said
whatever you're going through.
Who said
My voice, my voice, my voice.
No.
I've always been guided by my inner guru, Sadguru, as they call it, So I kind of, it was difficult, of course, but I decided that if that's what I'm meant to do, that's what I have to do. So I did not hesitate to share what all I was going through and, how many, flaws I had and how poorly I measured up. I shared it all. And the beautiful thing about it was that that's where I learned the power of vulnerability. The beautiful thing was the more I was sharing, the less afraid I was of how others would see me. Otherwise we're always afraid that, okay, my God, I'm supposed to be this editor, I started off as bureau chief in Life Positive, and I'm supposed to be this Life Positive bureau chief, and they'll look at me and think what a dreadful representative I am of Life Positive, and they'll point fingers at me. So you're full of all that worry, but the minute you start saying, before anybody says anything, let me only share whatever are my, the flaws. So and the more I did that, the more free I was of public opinion. And that was a remarkable thing. And the second thing is I found the more I was sharing all this, the less hold it had on me. I was healing. I was actually healing because I was sharing. Whereas if I kept this a deep, dark secret, and anyway, the person you are, the energy you pass out, it's never a secret. You can imagine it's a secret, but everybody knows where you're coming from. So if I kept that as a secret, everybody knows where you're coming from. You can't hide a thing from anyone. If I'd kept that as a secret, it would have taken me a lot more time to work through it, But as it happened, it did take enormous time. But because of the fact that I was sharing about it, I had a lot of freedom to be who I was.
Wow. What impelled you to start the Zen of Good Writing course? This is like one of my favorite questions. And your workshops are known for blending spirituality with the art of writing. So tell us more about this, how you decided to start teaching.
Okay. Well, you see, what had happened was that anyway, somewhere along the way, a lot of people have been asking me to teach them writing. I wasn't interested. I was going to become enlightened, then I was going to become a guru, and then I was going to go into spirituality, teach people spirituality. So I was least bothered about teaching anybody how to write. But then what happened was, since 1996, I was working with Life Positive. And there wasn't all that much money in Life Positive, and that didn't really matter to me because my mother and I was only responsible for my mother, and both of us lead very simple lives. So it never really mattered to me that I didn't have much money. But by the time, I was 57, I really began to worry about having enough money for my old age, because old age was pretty imminent, you see. And Life Positive continued to have its monetary issues. So the most important thing was around that time, I felt within myself that I was now ready to hold workshops. Holding workshops was a 20-year-old dream and a goal. But I had so much of work to do on myself, I was so shy and so full of, inferiority complex and all that. So I was never good at speaking to people one-on-one. So I had to heal all that. And sometime in end of 2014, I kind of felt, okay, now I'm released and I can do this. And that combined with the fact that money wasn't flowing in, and I had a very ambitious target for myself as to how much I should save, I decided now I'm going to start holding these workshops. And I didn't realize, that it would be as successful and as took off in a pretty good way. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
I think it's true for all people who don't chase money through their careers. I think money eventually chases them.
I absolutely agree with you, Suman. In fact, I once wrote on FB that, this workshop for me is God's provident fund. because I wasn't going to get any pension or provident fund or anything like that. So I said, this workshop is God's way of giving me this pension or provident fund that I needed for my old age.
I just studied a formal course in Bhagavad Gita last year, and they keep saying that if you spread God's message, God will always take care of you. Like you don't try too much, or you don't have to run the rat race. When you're in the spiritual world.
Totally. That really was proven for me, and I've always had faith in God and always, hung on to God. But that really proved completely that, what a wise decision I took when I left society and moved into Life Positive with with nothing in hand, as such.
So I recall attending a workshop with you on journaling, wherein you spoke about how journaling can reduce the intensity of your emotions and is a tool for self-transformation. You also said that just by writing your emotions on paper, you can transfer them.
Yeah.
So could you tell us, just for the people who are watching, a little bit more about this?
Yeah, of course. Actually, it's really what you might call a miraculous thing, that just by the simple process of writing something down on paper, you actually transfer it from here onto the paper. It's really miraculous. And the reason why this happens is because writing makes things conscious. Whatever you write, you bring it out into the conscious mind. What's lurking inside, like for instance, you yourself will acknowledge that every time you write or even say, it doesn't really matter. Every time you write, for instance, that I'm unhappy, or I'm angry, or I'm jealous, or whatever emotions you may be going through, you will find that the emotion is less intense. I'm sure you must have.
Works better compared to speaking it, you're saying?
Yeah, writing is better, but even speaking is fine. So do it either way. But even if you were to admit to yourself in the privacy of your own mind, because how does it work when you're angry? Basically, you're just going on abusing that fellow that other person in your mind. Instead, if you were to just say, I'm angry, you would find that the anger would just become so manageable. So similarly, when you write these things down, you will find that your emotions are much more manageable because you brought them out to the conscious mind. And whatever you bring to the conscious mind has less of an impact on you. So this is the power of writing. This is the power of particularly journaling, because when you're journaling, actually you're going to write about personal stuff, and because of that, journaling has a very powerful impact on you as a person. Easy, my goodness, you don't have to pay any psychotherapist or anything, any money. You're just doing it for yourself, and at the end of it, you're free. So you really can't have a better deal than that,
Yeah, I think writing is also very much part of counseling and
absolutely, exactly what even I was going to say. That most therapists actually use journaling as part of their toolkit. So it's really a powerful thing. We should be so grateful to God that there are so many really simple but beautiful ways of helping us handle our troublesome emotions.
Yeah, the ocean of the world, which is that Bhavsagar, where we are going to get tossed if we are born.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And do you hold these workshops as well? I was not sure if you hold these for the general public. I know you held it for a group of friends, but do you also hold journaling workshops, Suma?
I've started that, Suman. Even as we speak, I would say I've just recently started. I thought it's time to introduce something new to the mix. And I started what I call special classes. So journaling is one of those,
Okay.
And yeah.
All right. So I will share those details below.
Great. Wonderful.
Fine. So the next question is, pardon me for asking this, Suma, how old are you? Because, we are not just aunties and
I have no hesitation at all, Suman. In fact, I'm absolutely proud of my age and where I am today. And personally, I do feel that, you just get better as you go along. That's been my experience. So yes, friends, I'm 64. I just turned 64 1 month back.
Wow. And Then the next question, a related question is, has age ever been a barrier for you as a woman in your work? Because you've had a long corporate career, long term.
No, Suman, I have to correct you. The last thing I've had is a corporate career. Thankfully. Yeah. I was always working with small organizations. And fortunately, the journalistic field isn't quite so rigid about these things. That's one thing. And I quite frankly, Suman, the first 3 decades of my life were the most miserable, and every decade after that has been better. So as far as I'm concerned, I just feel that the older I get, the happier I am, the more peaceful I am, the more productive I am. Yeah, and I quite frankly don't see. I'm never going to hang up my boots. At least is how I feel. We'll see what the universe decides about that. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't intend to hang up my boots, and I'm definitely looking to be 70 and 80 and all that, and still as active as ever.
Actually, that's the beauty of writing. I would say, being a writer myself, I think writing, like age, gets better as you grow older, and like wine gets better as you grow older. And also, I think that's one of the perks of writing, with all the cons, which I'm coming to. So with all the artificial intelligence that assists writers across the globe, it's like now how singers are tweaking the texture of their voice through softwares. Even writers, there are these tools like Grammarly, there are transcription tools. So do you think a writer today can really make a living just being a writer?
It really depends, I think, Suman, on what you mean by making a living. If you're actually working for a journalistic, magazine, or these days, I think all the action is digital. So if you're working, if you actually got a job that pays you to write, then I think you can make a pretty good living, though it's totally a fact that the whole field of journalism is going through, and even the publishing world as well, is going through a major flux. And it's certainly not as comfortable as it used to be at one point. So the one thing I do tell my people is, that don't expect to make a fortune through writing. Especially when I say my people, I'm talking about the participants who come for my workshop. Most of them are not necessarily young. Many of them have actually joined the workshop because they've always had a yen for writing. And, by the time they reach their 30s and 40s and all that kind of stuff, they feel, more ready to take it on. And also I feel social media is playing a huge impact in making people want to write better, because this is something we've never had before, which is that everyone has a chance to write and share their viewpoints. So I keep telling them, just write because it makes you happy. Write because you have the chance now, which you didn't have earlier. And I don't give them any promise that, they're going to become the next Ambanis or anything like that. I don't know, but at the same time, if you're fortunate to have a career in, writing like you and I have had, I think it's not been too bad. I shifted, tracks and moved into the spiritual zone. But if I'd continued as editor of Society, I'm sure I would have done pretty well for myself financially.
Fair enough. The last 2 questions. So, writing is always a lonely job done in silence and away from the crowds. So has the loneliness of the pandemic, or the isolation, if that's a better word, worked better for your writing?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I was happy during the pandemic. I've been pretty happy these last 2 years. I feel my spiritual progress was pretty good. Looking back over the last 2 years, and I felt as if literally the universe had maneuvered me, into the space where I wasn't going to be running hither and thither, because I was traveling quite a lot in holding these workshops all across the country. So I was traveling a lot, and so I kind of felt the universe is telling me now stay put. And oddly enough, I just kind of felt I'm now ready not to travel. I'm just ready to stay at home. And I've never felt even for a minute that I should be traveling or anything. I've been very content. As far as writing is concerned, my focus was on the spiritual growth, so the writing wasn't so intense. But come this January, I actually started writing a book on my family. And yeah, and not only that, I also have a book waiting in the wings at Hay House. It's called 50 Life Lessons. I sent it to them on September 2019, and it should have been out, but because of the pandemic, I think the whole publication has been delayed. So that was written, but it was written before the pandemic. But in January this year, I actually started a book on my family, and it's not something I don't know whether I'm going to share it to the world or not. It's meant for the family at the moment, but it's been an amazing experience. I kind of feel it's some kind of a homage to my parents, a kind of an acknowledgement for all that they've done. It's given me a great sense of completion. And I feel that, it's something I needed to do before moving on to the next thing. So.
I wish you decide to share it, or at least share it with a few people.
I definitely will share it with you, Suman. I enjoyed writing this, honestly.
Thank you for the trust. And the last question, but most important, I think you've already mentioned a few things earlier, but if today you had to give a piece of advice to women over 40, women who, like a lot of the things you shared are, they have inferiority complex, they're empty nesters, or, they've left a job which was the only thing that was keeping them going, or just been at home and, don't know what to do now, or, haven't pursued their dreams. What would it be?
Well, actually, I think the first thing I would tell them is that it's simply awesome to be a woman. It's absolutely awesome to be a woman. The qualities that we women have is exactly what the universe or the world is looking for just now. Women stand for nurturing, for, conciliation, for love, for cooperation, all the quality and so many more, soft qualities, which somehow or the other, the patriarchal age that we've been living in has not at all honored, but yeah. And it's because of, the patriarchal age that we're living in such a violent, conflict-ridden world at this point. And it is we women who have to take it forward. Our next step of evolution depends on women. So I think the first step for all women is basically to just own your own wonderful qualities and be proud of who you are, And then secondly, heal. All of us need to heal from the patriarchal age. And thirdly, whatever, however it comes up to you, contribute to this new, beautiful, evolving era that we're standing, on the threshold of, which is, according to me at least, I used to call it the new age, but then that word became rather vitiated. So I'll just take Eckhart Tolle, who calls it a new earth. So kind of an era, of oneness and togetherness and brotherhood of man, and, where peace and love and all these qualities are emphasized rather than the material qualities. A shift actually from a material to a spiritual culture. And the beauty of it is we women are going to make this happen. So I feel very proud of being a woman.
It's always a fabulous conversation with you. And I'm so glad that, you've come on this platform, and I'm really looking forward to the snippets and as well as the interview. And I hope to speak to you again for the channel.
Thanks a lot, Suman. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was so kind of you to choose me. Thank you so much, and all the very best for that channel. It's an idea whose time has come, and it should rock. I'm very confident.
Thank you, Suma.
You're watching Not Just Auntie with Suma Nadepalli.